Right. All right. Hi, everybody. Let's get started. So for today's class, we're just going to review a little bit of things that we've done in the past. We've talked about how we could reach out using the web to find people or to find clients. And there's one last thing that I want to try. One last thing that I want to touch on is that hopefully, you're generating a bunch of content. You're finding a little bit of contact from outside people. Some of them might be hirers or maybe clients. Some of them might be other designers or other developers. There's one last thing I just want to touch on, and that is how to act with the client. And this is one of the things that clients love. They love to give comments on your work. And we're just going to talk a little bit about how to handle that when they do. So I'm just going to jump in here as we talked about a little bit. We're going to talk about a few things today. So obviously client, not just client, but also user feedback, of course, designer feedback, and getting feedback from developers. These are kind of all the different touch points. Obviously just related to operations that you would have as a designer to make you really excellent at your job. So I want you to imagine right now that you're in the middle of a client presentation. You've made this amazing work, you've shared it, it's going well. And suddenly the client starts to speak up. They put up their hand and they ask you a common question. Again, you've practiced this kind of presentation a billion times and you've nailed the presentation. So you got nothing to worry about, right? Well, what happens when a client uses words like clean and modern, and you're not really sure what they mean? Clean and modern here could actually mean, slick and stylish. It could be minimalistic. You could be looking at the client and you could just be wondering, if they have any sense of design in their background or in their education. And frankly, it starts to get a little bit vague as to what the clients are thinking when they say these kind of words. So this actually, I want to say here, there's another thing the client might do. They might lift up their hand and say, let me try this other color. Or they said, have you ever thought about doing this orange? Have you ever tried to think about adding brown? These kind of things. It's always kind of alarming when the clients start to step in there. And the last thing I would mention is kind of scary is when a client starts to add features outside of the contract. So they start saying stuff like, it'd be really great. What if it could do this? And suddenly immediately that these are ideas that are outside of your contract. And of course, they would have to be paid for, or they would have to be done for free. These are all kind of alarming instances. As I said, these are kind of sudden changes at the end of the project. So what do you say? Now, this is actually, it's a good question, but it's kind of the wrong question that you want to ask. If you get this kind of reaction from a client, it's almost like you're in damage control at that point. You seem to have made a series of mistakes, and now you're presenting something based on those mistakes, and the client is kind of panicking. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to deal with the client here. Meeting the client's needs, of course. You might have seen this guy, Zhuo. He's got a terrific YouTube channel. You can look it up. It's called The Future. Zhuo is a terrific designer and has been talking to a lot of different things in design, not only things like typography and color and style, but also regarding business itself, so the business of design. And Zhuo, he has said himself that when clients start kind of stepping in to do part of your job or do some of your work, it's usually when they're panicking. They're worried, they're freaking out, they're thinking about the deadline. I'm going to jump in here and I'm just going to say, yeah, clients are panicking. They're trying to think, how can they make do with the work that you've created? And in the back of their minds, they might be thinking that you're not really listening. All right, so these are all very subtle things. When you talk about style and design, and the client starts criticizing it, it seems like this is a conversation that should have been had a long time ago. As I said here, the solution is to go back in time. So this is an imaginary project. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the time machine and we're going to go back to the very beginning of the project. And let's just kind of restructure how everything works. So I want to just go back to this model. The first 80% of the project could be called communication. And again, think about some of the things that we do. We generate wireframes. We add these kind of clickable wireframes, right? We start talking about color. We start adding higher fidelity, that sort of thing, right? These are always used as a way to communicate with the client to help sort out what exactly they want. And again, it's not to say that clients speak in an indirect way or that clients are wishy-washy. It's really just to make sure that your communication is very, very strong. For example, if the client just gives you a whole bunch of printed documents, they might have been generated by engineers or maybe the technical team, and you might have to go through those yourself and understand what exactly they're asking for. This could mean a series of very frank phone calls that you have with the client or with their project manager to make sure you know exactly what they want. Again, why are we having this conversation? It's because designers find this stuff kind of, I don't want to say this, but kind of boring. A lot of designers are very happy to jump into Figma or Sketch and start mocking up some beautiful work. That's what a lot of people think was the fun part, right? The creative part is working those things out. But on the communication side, when you pick up the phone and you have a serious conversation with the client about what they need or what is their, like minimum viable product, a lot of people don't enjoy those. I don't think they're bad. Usually the client is very positive and very clear, but I understand why designers just want to jump into Figma. So I get it. So let's kind of break it down into steps. And again, this is all coming from Chris Do. So yeah, definitely check him out on YouTube. So the first thing you want to do, you want to figure out their business ideas, their buzzwords. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is I want to get away from unclear statements. All right, I want to get away from casual statements or things that might be interpreted in a few different ways. Any kind of buzzwords, or when you talk about various components that are on the screen. As a designer, you may have a finicky way of describing components. And the designer, maybe they didn't even mention them. For example, designer didn't even talk about what the mobile experience was. In the back of your mind, you're assuming that there's going to be a mobile experience. You need to kind of sort it out, get very, very honest with the client. And, if it means that there's new scope, you might have to address it. You might have to say, hey, look, this is 30% more work than we expected when we designed this contract. You might have to go back and say, look, we can do 6 of these 10 features, but we can't do all of them, right? Again, this is the painful part. Once you get past this step, every step gets a little bit better, a little bit easier, and you get much, much closer with what the client really wants. Now, this is number 2. Again, it's a tough question, right? It says narrow down their goals for this app. Again, this is very early stage material. This could be done in the very first week. Narrow down their goals, right? They probably have a wondrous amount of ideas about what are really cool features that you could have. And I want to try to get it down to about less than 10 or less than 5, key features that are going to be released at the end of this, 2-month process. As I said here, a top priority is very easy to design for. But when you have multiple priorities and multiple user types and multiple flows, it starts to get a little bit hairy, right? And it starts to really force you to be like the world's most incredible designer, because you're designing for multiple entry points and multiple points of view. And obviously that requires you to start talking to people and interviewing various people. So do yourself a favor and get serious on step 2 here, so that your end result is super clear. Again, we want to get to these wireframes ASAP. All right, I want to get to these nice clickable wireframes as soon as possible. I say here, consider wiping any feature that doesn't serve the priorities of step 2. Consider using those story points for other important features. This is smart work. The client might say, hey, this is all I'm asking. This is all I wanted. This is what I paid for. But once you sort out what they really want, some of those points might grow. And what they really paid for are those complexity points. What they paid for was, say, 150 or 200 complexity points. And if something actually has more points than you thought it did, well, we should be doing fewer features, right? Anyway, ASAP, get the wireframes in front of the client, be very communicative with them, let them, add comments, something you can do right in, obviously you can do it in Figma, but you can also do it in Vision. Just kind of open up these kind of channels of communication, invite 3 or 4 people to comment on if you want. We can always delete the comments, but that feedback is really valuable to you. All right, so again, we're thinking about a lo-fi. We talked about getting wireframes. Now we're talking about the lo-fi clickable mockup. Again, just building on the previous step. Clients should be excited about the foundation and have zero interest in the appearance, right? So they should be seeing black and white boxes, with boring Arial text. They should be excited about the direction you're going, the changes you're making, and at the same time, keep in the back of your mind, you are essentially iterating every week, or every version that you make of these wireframes, you are iterating. And you should be documenting this yourself, so that when the final thing is out and it's a tremendous success, you'll have all the documentation so you can create a beautiful case study. All right. Step 5. Step 5, ensure that whenever you present your work for approval, you're getting it from the big boss. I don't think I really experienced this very much as a designer, but from time to time, a designer or a team will point one person to be the representative for obvious reasons, right? Everybody has a busy schedule. It's better to have one person be the quote unquote point man and make the decisions. I just want to make sure that that person is a significant player. I want them to be a major stakeholder. I don't want them to be a small person on the team. Why? Because their opinion may not be worth that much. We need somebody who is a real decision maker on the team, a real project manager, or maybe an IT professional, something like that. For example, some people might not really care about visual design. They're only really caring about features. Maybe that means you need to have a marketing person in that meeting commenting on features. They might comment, when we get to things like features, that is. Anyway, I've seen this happen in the past. Just make sure it doesn't happen to you. Ensure that the person in the meeting is a significant player, is a decision maker, so that their opinion matters, and it's going to matter 3 or 4 or 5 weeks from now when you're presenting the final project. I don't want anybody to be shocked by what they're seeing, because the real players should have been there in the early stages. And the last thing, number 6, is you can design your butt off, right? I want you guys to actually say, okay, we know exactly what this does. I know what every single page is for. All the users' needs are being met. All the clients' needs are being met. Now I can kind of soak in to my beautiful, color schemes and fonts and all these different component styles that I want to build. Now I know that I can kind of focus my creative energy on step 6, rather than stressing it out for several weeks, okay? So I would say this is at step 6. It doesn't necessarily mean do all the design, quote unquote, design in the last week. It just means you got a few things to sort out before you start thinking about this kind of visual aesthetic, because the visual aesthetic doesn't matter if the functionality is broken. That's why. And again, by the time you get here, you should be ready to amaze the client, because you're already meeting all of their needs. And all you're really doing is just kind of polishing this beautiful thing you've created with adding their logos, adding their colors and their branding, adding your talent to the work, and they're going to love your final project. So if you want, I'll give you guys a second. You are more than welcome to screenshot this one. Otherwise, I can just drop it into the chat later. Anyway. Also, don't forget, you guys, you can find all about UX. You can find us on YouTube. I'm going to add a link to the Meetup page. So if there's any meetings that you haven't seen, you can always catch up. There are 8 stages. This is the 8th stage. And yeah, make sure that you check anything that you've missed in the past, because I know Sunday, maybe you're having Sunday dinner, maybe you're having a birthday party. I got it. But yeah, everything will be on YouTube and you'll be able to do a little bit of work there in the past. Okay, at the end of the day, now talking to users, we talked about this in the past. This is crucial, right? So, let's talk to users. Let's get some iteration from them. Obviously, this is going to be done in the very early stages. If you're not talking to users, I understand, I know how it feels. Maybe the client is the only person you need to please, but keep it in the back of your mind. If you want this project to be a success 6 months from now, 2 years from now, you have to hear from what the users have to think. Clients know a lot, but they're not geniuses. They're not psychic, right? And very often they do not talk to the user. They'll look at things like downloads. They'll look at conversion rates. They'll look at margins and profits and all that stuff, which obviously matters. But if they're not actually talking to the users, they might not know why some things aren't really taking off. So if you're not talking to the users, talk about it with your team internally and think about how you can hire maybe another UX designer or maybe a UX researcher and bring them into the team. Okay, research should be a top priority. Now, the other thing that you might do as your design team grows in your studio is you might actually get designer feedback. Now, what I'm looking for here maybe is perspective on the user. So other designers might ask you why a certain screen is complicated. They might say, this is actually very confusing. I expected it to go like this. All these things are really valuable. Just try to make sure that you're not working too much on the visual aesthetic. Just make sure that you're working with them on the wireframes and things like that. Because that's the part that really satisfies the client. And when you get to things like visual UI, you might share that with them as well. But I want to make sure that the wireframes get a lot of attention. And I made this mistake, of course, and other people have made this mistake, is you want to work in a company where people trust each other. So for example, if one of my designers wants to show me her work, she has to trust that I'm going to say something that is constructively critical. She has to trust that I'm not going to insult her or insult her talent. These are all things that really matter. Sometimes people hate feedback and they find it very painful. So your role before you start talking about feedback is, do you have a trusting relationship with the other designers? For some reason, working with developers, I don't think anybody really cares. They don't take it as an insult if you kind of give them feedback on their ideas. But designers, I think people take it very seriously when somebody gives them negative feedback. So get the trust first, and then you can talk about getting feedback. Here's a terrific example. Julie Zhuo, she used to be running design at Facebook for several years. Check out her book if you want, The Making of a Manager. It's not necessarily about design. It's basically how to be a manager, but it's coming from obviously a terrific designer. So yeah, check it out. Julie Zhuo, she talked about having critiques internally. Anybody who works at like Amazon or Apple or any of these major tech companies we know, they always have critiques on essentially a weekly basis. Sometimes a designer will just say, hey, can I borrow you for 5 seconds? You go in, sit down, talk to them about one screen or one flow. Sometimes it can be a very casual operation. Some teams, they have actual meetings at the end of the week, and they invite people to have these kind of meetings. The way it works is, again, you need to have trust, obviously. The other thing that we want to do is we want to give everybody in the room a chance to speak up. So I don't want to rely on who is popular or who is shy. What we usually do is we ask designers or developers or whoever is invited to write down notes. So for example, I might present a screen to you. I might tell you what I think the problem is with it or what the challenge is with it. And I might have 3 or 4 designers, just writing down notes or comments that they want to make so that everybody gets to speak up. And I'm not just relying on groupthink where one team leader speaks up and everybody just agrees with them. So that's why. Anyway, check it out if you want to read more about how to be a good manager for your future career and for your promotion. Now, developer feedback is actually pretty easy. The funny thing about it is that most people don't even think about it. Most people don't even think about talking to developers. Why would I ask them? They don't care. Well, they do care. In fact, at a very early stage, a developer can look at your early wireframes and immediately see where it's completely broken. For example, you might think a developer can easily implement your designs because that's kind of their job. But what a developer really wants to do is implement it in a nice, sleek way with minimal code. That would be better. So they might see a gaping hole. But one of the things I find whenever I talk to developers is they see the world in terms of these, very specific situations. What happens if somebody creates an account and they have no friends? Well, what do I see on this screen? What happens if I delete all my messages? What happens here? And so on and so on. So I found that talking to developers is really fun in a weird way. As I said, there is no insult. There's none of that kind of negative feedback. And I think just the sooner you talk to a developer, the better. Because I feel like they feel it's almost like a compliment that you're coming to them and asking for their feedback. We have a term from this in the world of design. We call it like socializing the design or social design, right? Just sharing it with other people or getting feedback from other people shows that you're part of a team. You're not an independent, solo operator. So go for it, especially if you think your design is beautiful. You might just say, hey, can I borrow you for 2 minutes? That's really all it takes. Just showing them wireframes and say, does this look good to you? I'm about to share it with the client and get their initial feedback. And they might say, you might think about doing it this way, right? These are not design necessarily what you consider visual design conversations. These are really about structuring the app or structuring the website. So in the early stage would be great where you can make changes and it doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't affect the code. And again, this is one that you always hear, right? For example, we like to use things like Zeppelin, but obviously I want to know what is the file format, or how do I share this with you, or what is the resolution, and so on. So you really just need to ask this one question, and developers will always have an answer for that. Okay, so presenting to clients, this is kind of what we started with in the beginning. Assuming you've done everything so far, you should be doing really, really well. So let's talk about sort of sealing that presentation. A little bit of salesmanship, a little bit of showmanship. So Mike Monteiro is a tremendous writer. He has written in the past a lot about design. These days, I think he feels like he's kind of covered everything you need to cover. Mike Monteiro is a founder of a design team down in California. And as I mentioned in the past, what I love about their company is that he is trained as a designer. His co-founder is trained as a researcher. They agree that no project will ever happen unless you have both design and research, right? It's a top priority. It's priority 1A and 1B. So they don't have to worry. They're always talking to clients. They're always getting feedback. And the client says, we don't care about research. They say, sorry, I don't think we can work with you, but I'm very happy to share you with one of our partners. All right, let's talk about some of the stuff he said. He said, the hardest thing to do in design is presenting work. And I say, that's a pretty bold statement, considering the amount of people that spend literally 8 or 9 hours a day working on UX design, working on UI design, and somehow it still, fills up their day. It takes a lot of time, and they're constantly going to other kind of meetups. They're constantly learning new tools. And here he is saying, no, that stuff's easy. The hard part is presenting. Okay, we'll see. So the first thing I want to do, if I know I'm going to be presenting on Tuesday to an important client, possibly a mid-phase client or maybe an end-phase client, so near the end of the ship date or approaching the ship dates, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put everything on my screen in a kind of keynote or PowerPoint presentation on my laptop, and I'm just going to start talking to my laptop. I'm just going to start talking myself through the presentation. Guess what? The first 5 or 10 times you do this, it's going to sound a little bit clumsy. There's 2 reasons for that. 1, you haven't memorized the presentation yet. And 2, you're actually finding where there are logical gaps in between each of the slides. So what you can do is you can identify that there's a missing piece between slide 6 and slide 8. You're saying, oh, the jump here is kind of weird. It's kind of random why I'm going here. Maybe I should put a little intermediary slide in the middle. Or you might find that one of the slides is redundant, it replaces the information on another slide. It should go. So yeah, give yourself enough time. It's going to take you several times to kind of get through the presentation and feel confident about it. And that means that when you present it to the client, you can actually do it without looking at notes, right? That's the super confident salesman. It's kind of like the Steve Jobs 2.0. You stand up, you have the room, you look confident, you look like a professional, right? That's the thing. That's what you're looking for. And that's the thing that makes the client so happy. Immediately they're, excited to hear what you're going to say. Making friends with clients. Again, this is something that we always worry about because we don't want to disagree with anyone. There's a sort of a feeling that you're trying to make the client smile, or you're trying to get them to jump out of their seat and get excited. And these are all things that, we sort of fantasize about. But remember, your job is not really being cool or being likable. Your job is solving their problems, right? They came to you with a problem. They said, I will pay you $200,000 to make this problem go away. Now you're presenting the solution to them. That should be enough to win them over. That means that you're allowed to disagree with them. That's okay. You can stand up for yourself. That's great. Teach them what to say. This is another one that I noticed after reading that book from Zhuo from Facebook, where we found out that, what, very often clients, maybe it's their very first time hiring a studio or hiring a designer, and they're like, I don't know what to say. They might think, I'm not a designer, I'm not a developer, I don't know how to comment on this, right? So one of the things you can do is you can stand up and you can say, we're here to get approval for X. That's why we're here. That's the whole point of this meeting. So I'm going to show you 3 things, and I want you to tell me which one you think is perfect for you, or which one is best. And of course they can make revisions, but that's the direction that they're looking. I don't want them to say that, you showed them 3 things and they would like to hear, 3 different things next week. No, teach them exactly what you want them to say, and they'll play ball. And I think they'll love it, right? Because that lets them be a professional at what they do. So they don't have to be designers. This is a funny one. And again, I understand the temptation, because if you see your job as being purely visual, right? Oh, my job is to show you this beautiful website that we built. Well, then obviously all you're going to do is just kind of show them all the stuff on the site. So sometimes junior designers will present something and they'll start with the navigation, they'll go from left to right, they'll work their way down. And what they're really doing is they're describing something that the client can see in about 2 seconds. So why are you really telling me all these different features, right? What you really should be telling me are, what were my top 3 goals, right? Remember, go to the very beginning, we talked about their priorities. So what were my top 3 goals? Okay, now if you could walk me through those goals, that would be awesome. As opposed to just taking me on a tour of the page, which frankly, again, they've already seen the wireframes, they already know what it looks like. And now you're just walking them through the kind of high fidelity version. It's kind of a waste of time. And again, it's actually undermining your entire job, because they want you to solve 3 problems and you're not talking about it. So you're not in real estate, just focus on the problems that you're solving. Yes, this is what happens whenever somebody comments on your work, right? And this is one of the hardest things to learn as a designer or as a creator of any kind, is that feedback, you don't have to violently respond. And I said, they're not criticizing you, they're criticizing your work. And what they're really doing often is that maybe there was something they told you and you didn't really listen. So it's possible that you were totally wrong. And, maybe you did 95% of the things, and there's this 5% that you didn't listen. And now they're giving you feedback on it. So you got to be able to sort of absorb it. Okay. So this is a wonderful way of responding before you start getting defensive, which again, it undermines you as a professional. Okay, I hear you. Yeah, let me think about it for a little while and I'll get back to you. I'll write you an email in, tomorrow morning, something like that. That gives you several hours to go internal and like think about what they're talking about, talk to developers and see if there was feedback and how you could better implement it. And then tomorrow you sound like a professional when you write them a polite email and just make sure you can get those bugs fixed before ship date or at least, the week of ship date. This is kind of an obvious one, but some people still do it. Yeah, you don't read a script, and I guess this is just a kind of a showmanship thing. But when you read a script, you're not looking at the user or the client in the eye, and it doesn't really feel like a sales job when you're not making eye contact, right? So yes, it's important that you are persuasive and you're kind of a bit of a showman here because what you're doing is you're selling your work. But avoid reading a script. That just feels very dehumanizing that you're not making eye contact, you're just looking down at a piece of paper. So that's why we do the practice, right? We practice it 20 or 30 times and then we come in on Monday and we stand up and we make a presentation, right? This is kind of a sales role. So, if you're not good at it, just start practicing it. You'll get better at it. As I said here, one of the things you can do, and I definitely did it, was go on YouTube. If you want to see some of Steve Jobs' best presentations, or I mean, Elon Musk is actually kind of a terrible presenter, but yeah, focus on guys like Steve Jobs or some of the people from Microsoft who are excellent presenters. Um, Go watch them, and maybe you can kind of learn from how they put the slides together and how they kind of stage the presentation and understand that people like Steve Jobs, they practiced 50 or even 100 times before going live. And I think this might be one of our last notes here. Asking the client if they like it is not your job. And again, I've actually heard Mike Monteiro say this a billion times, right? Is that it's you can't even really call yourself a professional if you ask this question, right? As this all goes back to, you do not have to be their friend. You're not there to impress them. You're there to solve their problems. So if you wrapped up by saying, we solved problem A, we solved problem B, we've solved problem C. So, I hope you like what you saw today. I'd love to hear your feedback, but thank you very much for listening. That's way more compelling than saying that their opinion can, sort of overthrow your entire, 2 months of work. Again, feedback in context of their goals. I remember when people talk about colors or they say, I'm not sure about this font. Remember that, right? Changing something that has nothing to do with their goals is therefore valueless, right? So you can actually respond by saying, hey, we started out by looking at these 3 things. We wanted to solve these 3 issues. As you can see, we've solved them. If you have any comments about how we solved them or how intuitive it is that we solved them, great. But anything outside of that, we could probably talk about that in the next phase of work. But for now, I'm just talking about these 3 goals. That's kind of how I would respond to it. I mean, you might want to be a little bit more friendly than that, but again, that's the idea. And I don't want them to feel like they're being ignored. I just want them to feel that you are the professional and that the way you handle this kind of criticism is to backlog, sort of write down what they said, put it in the backlog, and then have a discussion about it when you open the next phase of work. If it is relevant, then absolutely you should be able to comment on, how soon you can do it. Great. But if it's irrelevant, let them know that so they know that, what they're talking about is a new stage of development. Again, telling a great story. We talked about having these 3 features. These features really came from the client themselves, right? It's like, here's the 3 problems with our current app. It looks terrible, it's confusing, it doesn't lead to conversions, whatever it is, right? Tell the story where the client is now going to be making way more money than they're already making. Or tell the story where they're now, they're going to have the #1 app on the market or something like that, right? Tell a story, get them excited by the end of this presentation. You know, this has nothing to do with them being your friend. This has you being a tremendous provider of an excellent service. Yes, right. So you can make it really exciting, because by the end of all that presentation, you've done, you know, said 2 or 3 months of work, and so you should have something you can brag about. They should be really excited about the future. So again, I'm going to be putting this on YouTube. I'll be sharing the link in just a bit. But in sum, I want the clients to be happy. That's the number one priority, right? I want users who are excited to sign up. You know, lots of beta testers who know about this product. They're going to be coming in. They should be excited to sign up. And obviously fellow designers and developers who are constantly talking to each other about design and about the next project, right? That's an amazing team, not a designer who's sitting by himself or herself and just kind of racking his or her brain about what the hell is the client talking about, right? And what I want is a full team behind this project so that everybody is proud of the work they did rather than being slightly confused by what the client is asking them to do. So I would love to answer questions. Again, I'm going to be sharing this online. Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for having me, everybody here. I don't know, does anybody have any questions about client presentations or any of this like inter-office discussions?
Yeah, sorry, Michael, I missed the beginning of it because I was late, but I was wondering, I mean, I really like your presentation. I was wondering if you're going to have anything similar in the future.
Similar, well, like I said, I'm going to be putting this one up on YouTube, but if you guys have ideas for like topics and things like that, please share them. Yeah, please share them. You know, you can email me in meetup.com, or you can message me on LinkedIn, and I'll think about it. That would be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Yeah, my idea is that if you go through from stage one, and this is obviously the eighth presentation, but I think that you guys should be very busy. Obviously, I'm sure that you're all very talented. The thing that a lot of designers don't do, and I'll put myself in this loop as well, is if you're not generating content, if you're not generating content and flooding your LinkedIn and your Facebook and your Instagram, if you're not doing those 100 days of Blender or what have you, if you're not doing those things, then it's almost like you're in neutral. You know, you're just kind of floating. But if you are doing those things, then every single day you're reaching out and you're starting to get feedback from the world. And then suddenly people are going to start seeing you as a creator of content or a creative force, which is really wonderful. So the way I see it, I hope you guys are busy. I know you have jobs. I know you guys have friends and family and everything, but work out some kind of time so that like maybe every week you see yourself as a content creator. And we said those are things that are outside of the client's work. So, you know, you might have a hobby like drawing, or maybe you just want to mock up some future apps, or maybe you want to do things like AR or VR and you can mock those up. Like, we're all fascinated by that stuff. You know, we've been living with the internet for what, 10, 20 years now, and we've seen a billion websites. But if you show me a creative use of AR, I will watch it because all I know is Pokemon Go and not much else, right? So like that's the kind of stuff that I would love to hear or love to see in places like LinkedIn or on Instagram, and I'm sure your clients would love to as well. So great question, and again, I will be sharing this on YouTube, and I hope you guys can see all the videos. Well done, well done. Right on. All right, guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Take it easy. And yeah, shoot me a line, drop me a line on Meetup if you want to. Again, you can always re-review stuff if you missed any of the earlier stuff. And yeah, have a wonderful night. Take care.
Thanks, Michael. You too.
Hey, wonderful.